And good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. My name's Tom Regan. I'm the chair of the Greater Royal Oak Democratic Club, and welcome. First, I'd like to have my officers, if you could all introduce yourself, please, starting with Lauren.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Jasinski. I'm the vice chair of the club. Tom, do you want me to talk about those two features now, or you want everybody to introduce themselves first?
Please do.
Okay, so we've got two additional features in our meeting this morning. One is that we've invited ASL interpreters here to join us for today's meeting. Throughout the meeting, you're going to want to look for Jackie Lozano and Anne Marie. The two of them will be switching on and off and offering ASL interpretation throughout the event. We've also turned on closed captioning. That's a new feature we've been able to add. So if you are hard of hearing or having a hard time understanding what somebody is saying, you can go ahead and turn on closed captioning. So in your menu at the bottom of your screen, there's a little gray closed captioning icon. You're going to want to click on that and then select show subtitles. And you can turn that on or off in that way. So two nice things.
Then our treasurer, Ian Duncanson, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry for the delay. I had another document open, was getting back to the Zoom. Hi, I'm Ian Duncanson, and I am the treasurer for the Greater Royal Oak Democratic Club.
Then Tim Chikorsky, are you on yet, our secretary?
I haven't seen Tim yet.
Okay, yeah, Tim will likely be joining soon. And then if this is your first time here, or if this is your first time in a meeting in a long time, we invite you to introduce yourself and tell us why you came. That's not required, but we it's just an opportunity. So if this is your first time at one of our meetings or your first time here in a long time, if you would like to introduce yourself, just go down to the bottom of the screen there and click on the participants icon. That'll open up a window to the right, and then click the raise hand icon and we'll call on you to introduce yourself. Or if you want to just unmute and start talking, if you can't figure out how to do that, that's fine too. But is there anybody here, your first time here, or your first time here in a long time? Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us why you came?
Randy Maloney, running for Oakland County Sheriff. This is my first time on this Zoom meeting.
Oh, thanks, Randy. Then we'll have a candidate's introduction at the end there if you want to give a brief update on your campaign.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else like to introduce himself?
I can go.
Alrighty.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
My name is Lauren Chandler. I'm a field organizer for Indy 11.
Oh, welcome, Lauren. Do you know, is Andy going to be joining us later in the meeting for a little candidate update?
Not that I know of. I'm sorry. I think you just get me.
Oh, okay, that's right. I did communicate with Andy. It looks like next month we're going to have Andy, but not this month. Yeah. Would anybody else like to introduce himself? Alrighty, let's go right straight to announcements. I've got one announcement. I do have Gary Peters signs at my house, and if you'd like to get a Gary Peters lawn sign, just come on by and grab it. I live at 3126 Glenview. And I'll put that in the chat. They're at my house under the carport, and it's help yourself. So if anybody wants a Gary Peters sign, come on by and get it. Does anybody else have any other announcements? If you do, you can click that raise hand icon and we'll recognize you. Or else if you can't find the raise hand icon, just go ahead and unmute yourself and say, I have an announcement. Alrighty, treasurer's report, Ian.
All right, so our current account balance is $3,313.19. Over the past 2 months, since we last met in June, we had $1,010 of dues in June, and then $1,100 in income in July. And then between June and July, of those totals, we had about $1,200 that came in as part of Dems and Beer. And then aside from that, we had expenses for Facebook ads of $725 dating all the way back to March that's been paid out for. And then $579.06 that's paid out for gift cards for Dems and Beer, as well as the cost of our Zoom membership.
Does anybody have any questions for Ian? Alrighty, let's go right to our guest speaker then. We're fortunate this month. We have Dessa Cosma from Detroit Disability Power. That's an organization that builds the organizing power of the disability community to ensure full inclusion of people with disabilities around Metro Detroit. As an old organizer, I always like it when people stress the word organizing power, because if you want to have power and you're not filthy rich, the only way to get it is by organizing. So with that, let's turn it over to Dessa Cosma from Detroit Disability Power.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dessa, and I'm going to be talking with you all for 15 or so minutes about some of the work that Detroit Disability Power is doing, but I'm also going to try to model some inclusive and accessible practices along the way. And so I'm really glad that that we have ASL interpreters today and that we're using closed captions. Also, one thing that's very helpful for people with all sorts of disabilities and the ASL interpreters is if we always say our name before we speak. So you'll often hear me say, "This is Dessa," even if I just said it, 30 seconds ago before somebody asked me a question. I'll probably say, "This is Dessa." Anyway, I'm really glad to be here with y'all today. And what I was thinking about talking about, because it's a pretty short amount of time, and there's centuries of ableism, which is the systemic discrimination of people with disabilities, with centuries of ableism that's every part of our culture. I can't get to everything, but what I wanted to tell you all a little bit about today is some of the organizing work that we're doing, why I started Detroit Disability Power, talk a little bit about language and why including people with disabilities is the right thing to do in many ways, including strategically. Does that sound good for everyone? Okay, sweet. And we'll have 15 or so minutes of question and answer too. So you are more than welcome to throw something in the chat while I'm talking, or just hang tight for a moment and ask me in a minute. And I want to just invite you to think now, like, what is a question that you have about disability inclusion, disability culture, disability as a political identity, how to engage people with disabilities or become more inclusive and accessible in your organizing or other work. So just start thinking about that stuff now, because you probably have questions somewhere in your brain. This is not a topic that we talk about very much, frankly. There's a huge taboo around disability, and culturally we just don't have a lot of opportunities to really dig in, and so that's why I'm here. So I have been very fortunate to spend my entire career working in social justice. I've done reproductive justice, racial justice, economic justice work, and it's been really powerful and meaningful to me. And also, I almost always found myself in that work as the only disabled person. I should say the only apparently disabled person, right? Visibly disabled person in the room. So it's Zoom, so you can't see me, but I'm a wheelchair user. I'm also a little person, so I'm about 3.5 feet tall. And it's very interesting that I spend all my time now on Zoom and nobody knows those things about me, when in real life, like, it's the first thing that you would notice about me. So, I was doing all this incredible political work, and I kept being lonely. I kept feeling like, where are my people? Why aren't we ever talking about disability? Why do I have to explain these really simple things about my life over and over again? And why isn't it part of our political analysis? I would work with these folks with like incredible race, class, gender analysis. And then I started talking about disability, and it was like their eyes would glaze over, or they would, slowly start backing away. And I just realized the depth of the discomfort around disability and the lack of political analysis when it comes to a disability justice framework. And so I started Detroit Disability Power 2 years ago, specifically, as Tom mentioned, to really build the organizing power of the disability community. And I just want to throw this out there. Feel free to jump in verbally or in the chat. What percentage of people do you think have disabilities? Just guess. Any idea? How do none of you have ideas?
10,
That's
7.
how many?
we've got guesses for 7% from Elaine and William Asher, 10% from Arvin Tom,
15%.
15 from Lisa.
Keep going. 50. Okay, it's not quite 50. So the official estimates are about 25%. Those are low estimates. And the reason those are low estimates is because not everyone knows if they have a disability. Not everyone is willing to disclose that information about themselves because of the stigma and discrimination that can come with it. And so, but the reason I bring this up is we're a really large group of people. We are one of the largest minority groups in the country, and we cut across every race and gender and class and religion, right? We are in every community, and actually certain communities have higher rates of disability. So low-income communities tend to have higher rates of disability because of structural inequality that causes disability, and also because of lack of access to basic needs and healthcare. And so we actually are this like pretty untapped, incredible resource for organizing. And it just really seemed stupid to me in all the political work I was doing over the last 20 years that we would not engage this large, valuable group of people, not only because in organizing and politics, we know we always need more people, we always need numbers, but because the insights, the policy insights, the solutions to systemic problems that people with disabilities can bring to a conversation is like amazing, right? So if you think about it, a person with a disability who has to navigate a world that was designed completely without them in mind might have some really valuable skills, right? Can you think of what any of those are? Imagine if you're going through your day and every single part of it was thought of and designed by a person who wasn't thinking about you and your needs. What might you be good at? Empathy, absolutely. Problem solving, 100%. Yep. Finding alternatives. We're like the queens and kings of workarounds. Absolutely resourceful. A lot of times we're better at knowing how to ask for help, right? Yep, more solidarity, more inclusion. Yeah, there's all sorts of things that people with disabilities are likely very good at that are the very kind of things that any of our organizations would want, right? The creative problem solving, the tenacity, the patience, the asking for help, those are all things that all of us need more of, right? When it comes to changing the world to make it a better place. And so, you know, I think that there's a misunderstanding culturally that people, including people with disabilities, or making accommodations for people is some sort of charity. That's pretty ridiculous, right? Like, we have so much to offer in so many ways that we really have to just restructure our society so that including us isn't so difficult. So, you know, a lot of times you'll hear folks say, oh, I wanted to do this thing in an inclusive way, but I didn't have the budget. Okay, that's, you know, understandable to some degree, right? ASL interpreters cost money. Large print, you know, you have to maybe make something in large print font in addition to the font size you were going to use anyway. Maybe you need a live captioner and that costs money. Maybe the venue where you want to have an event is not wheelchair accessible, so you have to go to another venue that costs a little more. There are likely going to be costs to be truly inclusive. Let me say this though. That building that wasn't accessible cost money to build and operate, right? And so what I'm saying is we didn't build in the full cost to begin with, right? So if we're saying like, oh, we can't include people because it costs too much, what we're forgetting about is all of the time and resources that were already dedicated to building something or creating something that left us out. So we did it wrong the first time, is what I'm saying. And so to just say, to be inclusive is too expensive, I think is really missing a major part, which is that ableism, the systemic discrimination of people with disabilities, is operating all the time on personal level, interpersonal level, meaning the way we treat each other, the institutional level, meaning the policies, procedures, and practices that our organizations and institutions use, and on the cultural level, meaning what we think is normal, what we think is beautiful, what we think is right or true. And so we have a lot of things to dismantle to get to where we want to be for inclusion, but it's worth it. And it's not just worth it for disabled people, it's worth it for everyone who's not disabled to get to hang out with us. And it's worth it. It's worth it for all people who are not disabled, who may become disabled at any moment in time, particularly as we age, right? And it's good for non-disabled people because we all probably love somebody with some sort of a disability, right? And we're trying to create, and I know that I know enough about your values in this club that you all believe in fairness and equity. And too often when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're not talking about people with disabilities. And so if we care about racial justice and we don't think about disability, we're leaving out 25% of people of color. If we care about feminism and we're not talking about disability, we're leaving out 25% of women. How could we actually achieve those goals without actually centering disability in those conversations? So before I wrap up to just take some questions, I want to talk for just a moment about language. You don't have to raise your hand, but I'm going to say, if you have ever stumbled around what language to use around disability, raise your hand. Have you ever tripped up? I mean, like, oh, what am I supposed to say right now? Okay, that's most of you. Thank you for being vulnerable. You're in good company. Language around disability is evolving. It can be tricky. As I said, there's a taboo, so we don't really talk about a lot of these things. There's a lot of shame around disability from disabled people and from non-disabled people. There's so much I could say about language, but the very quick version is, if you say people with disabilities, you're probably going to be fine. If you say disabled people, you're probably going to be fine. If you are around disabled people and you pay attention to what language they're using to talk about themselves or refer to themselves, that's a really good way to learn what their preference is, right? There's not one answer. Not all disabled people agree. I'll give you one quick philosophical kind of thing. So you've probably heard of person first language, which is person with a disability. This is often used in government and social work and education, right? Person with a disability. And that came out of a long history of people with disabilities not being considered fully human. For generations, disabled people were put in institutions, locked away and forgotten about. And being considered not fully human, the reaction to that was for disabled communities to say, you know what, we're people first, right? We have a disability, but we are a human being. I'm trying so hard not to cuss right now. This is like where I get like so impassioned and want to curse. And so, you know, people said, we're people first. And that became person first language, which is very respectful. It's, you know, I'm a person with a disability. But then as times changed and we evolved, people were like, well, of course we're people. Why do we have to put that first? We don't say person who is African American. We don't say person who is Jewish, right? We say African American. We say Jew. We say woman, right? Like why would we be separate? Why do we have to declare our humanity? That's ridiculous, right? And they have, that's called pride language. So I'm a disabled person is like, hell yes, I'm disabled. I'm not ashamed of that. It's a really important part of my identity. And I'm proud of that. So within disability community, it's often generational. We tend to use both of those terms. Some people really like one more than the other. I think both are great. And so that's why I say generally you'll be safe using either term. Handicapped is definitely outdated. So is cripple. I would definitely not say the R word. And, you know, I think the last thing I'll say about language real quick is you don't really have to know someone's diagnosis. It's really not important unless they want you to know. And so asking people, unless you have a relationship with someone, asking them the specifics of their disability is pretty rude. And so I would avoid that too. There's so many more things I could say, but I'm aware of time. So I'm gonna just look in the chat real quick. If you have put questions in there, I'll try to get to them. And then also, you should feel free to unmute yourself or throw something else in the chat. Healthcare rationing, I can definitely talk about.
Okay, now if you have a question for Dessa, if you could go to the bottom of your screen and click the participants icon, that opens up a little window on the right. And then inside that participants window, if you could click the raise hand icon, and then we'll know you have a question for Dessa. And if you can't figure that out, just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it. But does anybody have any questions for Dessa Cosma right now? Ian Duncanson, please go ahead.
It's also okay if she wants to answer that one from the chat first. Should I go first or let her go
Pardon
ahead
me,
and
I
answer
didn't
that
notice
one?
that. Oh, so there's a question from Ellen Knoppow. Could you talk about the shortcomings of the ADA?
Yeah, so there's actually two questions in the chat. One is about healthcare rationing. I'll do that and ADA, and then Ian, I'll come back to you. So healthcare rationing is a really big concern in disability community. If you all remember back to the beginning of COVID in the US, there was this narrative around like, okay guys, everybody calm down. It's just sick and old people. Don't worry. And it's like, wait a minute, we are the sick and old people. Like, we're not expendable. What is this? It was really concerning. And so disability community, including us in Detroit Disability Power, really we're pushing hard back on that narrative, because what we also knew is that rationed care would put us at a disadvantage. We knew that if there was decisions made about who got scarce ventilators or scarce hospital beds, that people would look at us and say, well, you know, you're probably going to die anyway. Like, it's not worth it. Let's like have younger, healthier people get the treatment. That is extremely discriminatory, right? And I think that because our culture is so ableist, a lot of us just thought like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we should save the young, healthy people, right? It's like, I mean, okay, like in a certain mindset, that makes sense. It's not a particularly fair mindset though, right? It assumes that the rest of us don't have value because our bodies or minds work differently. So in Michigan, we pushed really hard, and thank you for any of you who signed any petitions with us, to make sure that we got an executive order to ban rationed care decisions being made based on people's disability. So the way that this typically works is that medical providers have some sort of probably unconscious bias about the quality of life of disabled people. And that's how they make decisions about who's going to get care and who's not. And we were ringing alarm bells about this immediately. So were other disabled people around the country. We got pretty gaslit, to be honest. A lot of people were like, oh, you're panicking, this, no big deal. So then, unfortunately, very sadly, about a month ago in Texas, there was an African-American quadriplegic 46-year-old man who got COVID. He was in ICU. He started recovering. The hospital quit feeding him and giving him water because they thought they assumed his quality of life was so low. He was a father of 5. He was married. His wife, neither him nor his wife consented to the stoppage of food and water for him, and he died in the hospital. And that is how serious the discrimination around rationed healthcare is. He literally was killed by a hospital because they thought that this quadriplegic man didn't really have a quality of life that was sufficient to save. Okay, I could obviously talk about that for a lot longer too. Shortcomings of the ADA. So we just celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a major, major milestone in disability civil rights. It is incredible, right? It has done incredible things for people with all sorts of disabilities. And the shortcomings include that it was written 30 years ago. So the world has changed quite a bit. So there's a lot of scrambling to keep up with technology and access to technology as part of public space, right? And especially now we're using technology as public space even more than ever. There's also shortcomings in that the ADA is not super well enforced. If you've ever tried to file an ADA complaint, It's not that filing the complaint is difficult, it's that getting anybody to do anything about it is difficult. I have filed numerous complaints and they've all been denied, and not because I was wrong about what the law protected, but because I guess nobody wanted to deal with fixing it. And it also makes it so that there's really a legal system approach, which means you have to be able to sue somebody. That's not really a particularly good way of, it's not the only way that we should be able to do systems change. So there are limits in that way. Okay, Ian, I saw that you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously we have someone at the helm of our country right now who has no restraint when it comes to making ableist statements. What's irked me a lot more lately is seeing Democrats stoop to the same level with comments about either Biden's health or about Trump's health or the way that they're operating about things. It just always rubs me the wrong way. And obviously you're the spokesperson that we have here talking on behalf of your organization, but I'm just kind of curious, like how you feel about those statements, how you react when you see someone who maybe is someone who is a family member or you've always thought identifies with you ideologically, putting things like that out there, and how do you open up those conversations without making people defensive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the power of language is really important to remember. This is Dessa, sorry. So the power of language is really important. And, we use a lot of ableist language in our everyday lives. Like we say crazy a lot. We might say spastic. We might say other things I can't think of right now. But the point is we've really normalized a negative association with all things disability to the point where we don't even really, we're not thinking about mental health diagnoses when we call someone crazy. But for people who have mental health disabilities, that further stigmatizes them, right? And what their life is like. And so, I try to be really careful about my language. And I also think it's just like, many of us having to have conversations with our family about race and sexual orientation things. There's all sorts of really toxic stuff built into our language, and we have to learn how to say, I don't know if you know this, but that term is actually blah, 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 blah. Or that term further stigmatizes people with mental health disabilities. And so I personally am trying not to use that term. There's techniques to like approach people in a way that like is less likely to make them defensive, but to explain to them the consequences of using language like that. And, when it comes to, I don't know. There's a lot of things I could say about the president that I won't say. But he's not an ally to the disability community in any stretch of the imagination. And if you ever want to see some cool stuff, if you go back to the when people with disabilities took over the Capitol to save the Affordable Care Act, there's some awesome, really moving footage of people being arrested and taken out of their wheelchairs and carried away and handcuffed to their wheelchairs. I mean, really, really pretty terrible stuff. But like that was people with disabilities pushing back on a president who didn't care about providing health care to us. And I think we saved the ACA to as much as we could. Okay, I'm pretty much out of time.
If you have time, there's a couple more questions people have.
Okay.
Well, there's one from the chat. I'll combine two from the chat from Clarence Dass and Landy Maloney. What's your perspective on courts, justice system, and law enforcement as far as accommodating individuals with disabilities? Can anything be improved?
Yep. This is Dessa. That's a question that I don't have time to fully answer, but a short answer is this. There is not an institution in the United States that doesn't need to do a much better job for people with disabilities. That means that, and the way to do that is every time a decision is made, or decision is in the process of being made, I should say, the question needs to be asked, how is this impacting people with disabilities? And the question needs to be asked, do we have disabled people here helping us think through the consequences of these decisions, right? And because disabilities are so diverse, right? Blind folks, deaf folks, mobility disabilities, mental health disabilities, chronic illness, developmental, cognitive disabilities, right? There's so many types that there are a lot of considerations if you're really gonna make a court system, a justice system, or any other sort of thing workable for us. You do have to do your due diligence. What I think is that we need to normalize that process and not make it so, the more we habitualize that question, the less arduous it becomes. And the more we start having ASL interpreters at every meeting, right? And closed captions at every meetings, and to a previous point, building that into our budgets in advance so that it doesn't feel like a hit to us, right? So I run an organization. I have a line item for accommodations, and in my case, I have a deaf staff member. So I know what I'm gonna, I know that I need to put a lot of money in that part of my budget. But if we all start building it in there, then when somebody says, hey, I need an interpreter for this meeting, we don't have to say, I'm sorry, I don't have the money. You're like, actually, I do have it. It's right here. So there's that. So in terms of, courts and police, more than 50% of people killed by police in the United States are people with disabilities. That is a statistic that most people don't know. That is largely people with mental health disabilities and people that are deaf. And you can imagine why that might be. So this is absolutely, police violence is absolutely a disability issue. And, our perspective at Detroit Disability Power is that reinvesting funds from police into community is a way to help people with disabilities get what we need, because we are currently not getting what we need from our state and local and federal governments. And so there's an opportunity to put our values into our budget process and align with our, better align with, who we want to be as a country. That's my short answer.
Arv, ready. Go ahead and ask your question, please. You have to unmute yourself, Arv. There you go.
Sorry. Yeah. Thanks so much, Dessa. I just had a cool question. What do you think we as a club could be doing to be more?
I'm responding to the chat. Okay. What could you be doing as a club? This is Dessa. I think when you're thinking about candidates to support, ask them what their disability platform is. They probably don't have one, but the more people that ask, the more likely they are to get one, right? When you're thinking about policies to support, figure out what the impact of that policy would be on disability community. When you're having elections for your executive board, have a question about disability. When you're thinking about diversity, don't just think about race, class, and gender, think about disability. Make your meetings accessible to the most people possible. Yep, I love this budget line item. There you go. That's another great way to put your values into practice and policy. And I think continuing to individually learn about ableism and disability on your own. There's so many good resources for that. And also, Detroit Disability Power does much longer training. So if any of you work for an organization or a business that wants us to come in and help you think through your own organization in terms of ableism and inclusion, we can do that too. So there's some suggestions.
Okay, Michelle, go ahead and ask your question, please. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, this is Michelle Cook. I'm a teacher, and I was wondering what you're hearing from your members about, school closings, online learning, possibility of going back to face-to-face, and accommodations that we should all be thinking about given the realities of COVID-19. Thanks.
This is Dessa. That is a super complex question. So we know that kids in special ed are probably extra struggling with virtual learning. We know that kids that have a lot of support staff at school are at home now with parents who are not getting a break, and the kids are not necessarily getting the supports that they normally would get and need. And that is not good for health, mental or physical. We also know that it can be expensive to be disabled, right? The kind of things that we have to pay for to adapt our homes and our life, there's not usually someone else to pay for that stuff. So all of that is a factor. And also, you know, some disabilities make us more susceptible to COVID to begin with, whether it's because of our immune system or because we have to physically touch more things to get around, because we have a mobility disability, or because we're blind. Folks who are deaf or hard of hearing can't read lips through a mask unless it's a clear mask, right? So there's a lot of considerations. What I would say is, I have no idea what the right thing to do is right in this moment, but there's a great article by Shayla Griffin, Dr. Shayla Griffin, in Medium right now, and I can try to quickly throw it in the chat in a moment, but she talks about how the most just thing to do is for kids from the most kind of, I don't think this is the term she used, but like at-risk communities to go back to school, because they need free lunch, they need, their parents don't have childcare and have to work, etc. And then those of us that have more privilege keep our kids home. So it reduces the spread, but allows kids the services that they need, that they get through their school system. So yeah, what I do know is that people with disabilities are almost always an afterthought in planning. And we're often left out of the conversations about our own lives. And that means that the outcomes are inevitably going to be more negative for us. And that's why we have to do the systems change work.
And County Commissioner Dave Woodward, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Hey, Dessa.
Dave, hi.
Dessa and I've worked on a lot of projects in the past, so it's just great to see you. And I apologize if you addressed this in the beginning of your talk and I missed it. With this upcoming election, do you feel, or I guess more importantly, what barriers need to be removed to make certain that we maximize participation from the disability community?
Thank you. Nice to see you. This is Dessa. So there's a couple things. So people with disabilities vote 6% less than our non-disabled counterparts. There's two main reasons for that. One is lack of accessibility at the polls. I've done a lot of work over the last 2 years of evaluating accessibility at polling sites in Detroit. It's a bad scene. It is not good. And the other main reason besides poll location accessibility is that candidates rarely speak to us, right? Like, where's the platform? Where's the thing that says, you, disabled constituency, I need your vote, right? Have you ever seen that before? You know, I have a dream that there will never be a candidate again who can win without the disabled vote. Like, that's when we know we've achieved some real power, is when people come to us and say, like, we need your community or we can't win, right? So that's my goal. So to answer your question, Dave, we need to hold clerks accountable for making sure that the voting process is accessible. That means brick and mortar buildings, but it also means the absentee process. The absentee process is particularly hard for blind people, right? There's been some change in Michigan this cycle because of a lawsuit from the National Federation for the Blind, but we're not quite there yet. And so, you know, making sure that decisions being made inside of clerks' offices are being conscientious of what disabled voters need is huge. And training poll workers to actually know how to assist disabled voters and actually know the rights of disabled voters. For example, if you're disabled and you need help filling out a ballot, you can take somebody with you into the ballot booth, as long as it's not your union rep or your employer. You can take them in there and they can fill it out for you. I can't tell you how many times disabled people I've known have tried to do that, and the poll worker says, you can't take them there with you. You can't do that. And it's like, actually, I can. This is my legal right. I also have a right to private voting. I also have the right to using an accessible voting machine if I can't fill out a piece of paper, right? But if the poll workers don't know this, they're not going to do a good job, and disabled voters are going to get frustrated and not participate. I'm gonna, in a minute too, I'm gonna drop in the chat. We are circulating for anybody that's voting in person this year. We're circulating a survey about poll site accessibility, and you don't have to be disabled to fill it out. But what it does is it helps us get information about different precincts, so that we can then engage the clerk if there are issues. So I'll drop that in the chat also. Thanks, Dave.
Joanne Brown, go ahead with your question, Joanne.
I am a poll worker in Royal Oak, and I know that Royal Oak goes out of its way to make voting accessible for everyone. We have, we're all instructed to help and allow somebody to help a person. Also, we have a special machine that they can sit at and work with. I can't speak for all cities, but Royal Oak does.
This is Dessa. Thank you so much for your attention to that. That's really critical. And those machines are required by federal law to be at every single precinct, including every early voting satellite location. And you don't have to be disabled to use those machines. Anyone can use those machines. Poll workers can't ask you why you need to use the machine. Everyone has the right to use the machine. So to your point, Joanne, the attention that you're paying to assisting and accommodating disabled voters is how it should be everywhere. And I'm really glad to hear about that. I wish that was the case everywhere. I just put the polling access survey in the chat. So, you know, feel free to circulate it widely. It's for everyone around the state to use so we can gather information. I'm gonna have to go in just a minute. I don't know if there's like one or two last questions, so I know you all have business to attend to also.
Are there any last questions for Dessa Cosma? I don't want to let you go just because you're such an excellent speaker and you're hitting on a lot of points that I haven't adequately considered. And I just, yeah, it's painful to hear you, but it's necessary pain. But yeah, thank you very much for that. Are there any last questions for Dessa?
Sorry. Hey, Dessa, this is Lauren. I did have a quick question. I'm also a teacher, like Michelle mentioned. And I think one of the things that I struggle with most personally is that we get paperwork on students, right? That I might know technically what their physical or learning or even a health concern disability might be. But sometimes it's hard to ask them about it. Could you give us like one or two kind of easy or helpful ways that we could ask people about their disability that isn't rude?
Yeah, this is Dessa. That's a great question. So I think a couple things. One is not assuming that people need help is really important. Sometimes I'm holding the door for someone and they rush to open it for me. And I'm like, oh, I'm holding it for you. And then they get mad about it because in their mind, a disabled person needs help, is not a helper, right? And that sentiment around helping runs very deep. And I'm not saying don't be a helpful person. I'm saying that when we're talking to disabled people, particularly in a position like a teacher or a medical staff or whoever, that we actually get consent from people. So I'm a big fan of instead of like assuming somebody needs me to push their wheelchair or guide them if they're blind or whatever, lift something up for them if they look like they're struggling, instead of saying, hey, let me do that for you, saying, hi, you know, let me know if you'd like some assistance, because then it's their choice and they can say no, but they know you're there if they want to take you up on the offer. That's not directly to your question, but to your question is similar in that if you have a student with, with an IEP and you know that they have a disability, it's, it's partly it's your responsibility as a teacher to make sure that they can learn. And so to say to them, I have your IEP here. I want to know how best to accommodate you. What are the ways that we can work together to make sure that you can fully participate and that you can learn everything you can learn? It puts it back into gives them some agency. And I don't know how old these kids are, right? That makes a difference too. But it's really so much about agency and so much allowing people to opt in and getting consent from people. Is there more to your question that I'm kind of missing, Lauren?
No, I think that helps. I agree. I personally do have high schoolers, so you're right. I think just having those conversations, I think sometimes a lot of us just feel that it's uncomfortable to ask, or that we're doing something wrong by acknowledging somebody's disability. And I just was, looking for a little advice on that.
Yeah, this is Dessa. I would say, like, those of us that are disabled, we didn't forget we were disabled, right? Like, you can't remind us of that, right? And I feel like sometimes with me, people dance around wanting to acknowledge my disability. And it's like, I have like literally never forgotten for one moment in my life that I'm 3.5 feet tall and use a wheelchair, right? Like you can't offend me by bringing up a thing about myself that I already know, right? And now you can offend me by making assumptions about what that means for my quality of life or my happiness. But to acknowledge a thing about me is not offensive. I think the dancing around it is obnoxious. I think the not having the right words is annoying. But bringing it up and addressing it is totally the right thing to do.
Eileen Orlansky has a question if you have time for one last question.
One last question. Okay, thank you.
Eileen Orlansky, go ahead, please. You're muted, Eileen. You need to unmute yourself. Go ahead, Eileen.
I'm trying.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to, I think I missed that you had mentioned Dr. Griffin was that at medium.com? Was that correct?
Yes, and someone put it in the chat.
I know, and I missed that too.
Okay.
So that would get me to, this was information about disabled children?
It's actually information about school children in general.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. That's my question.
Sure thing, no problem.
And thank you, Dessa Cosma. That's an excellent talk. You're an excellent speaker, and you've given us a lot to think about. We're going to have a board meeting soon and discuss some of these issues. But thank you very much for coming. You're an excellent talk, and you're an excellent speaker. You're doing excellent work, and I just can't say enough good things about you. But thank you very much.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. Have a good rest of your meeting and a great weekend. Stay safe.
Thanks, Dessa.
Thank you.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
We're going to go right into Democratic Party reports. Michigan 1 is the Democratic Party coordinated campaign. They try to coordinate all the different people running for office into one Get Out the Vote and Voter ID campaign. Sam Miller, could you give us a report on what's the Michigan 1 campaign is up to?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sam Miller. I'm the field organizer in Royal Oak with the One Campaign for Michigan. Have a couple updates of things that we've got going on this week. First off, this coming Thursday, August 6th, from 7 to 8, we're going to have a Zoom meeting with our precinct delegates in Royal Oak. The purpose, we want to celebrate all of the great work that our precinct delegates have done over these last several months to mobilize voters in Royal Oak ahead of the primary, and talk about the effectiveness of the actions that have been taken and what's planned moving forward. We'll be talking about the One Campaign's kind of Get Out the Vote strategy over these next 3 months, and how we can work together to be as successful as possible come November. So if you're a precinct delegate in Royal Oak, would love to have you join us. I've been working with Paul, and we'll be sending out follow-up email to make sure everyone has that information. In addition, in regards to the One Campaign, we've been making a big push on our phone banks over these last few months. our remote phone banking opportunities, which we're continuing to hold Tuesday through Sunday at various times throughout the day. We've had a ton of success with these across the state, and especially in Royal Oak. I know many of you on this call have volunteered with us, and we super appreciate all your help. And as we move forward, are looking to continue to ramp up our efforts so that we can reach the number of people that we'll need to win in November. So I'm going to put my contact information as well as a mobilized link to our phone banks in the chat. And if you're interested in getting involved with us, would certainly love to talk about our opportunities and have you on the team.
Thank you, Sam. Does anybody have any questions for Sam Miller? Nope, you explained yourself well, Sam. Thank you very much. And if you're interested in volunteering to get this monster out of the White House, you need to talk to Sam. And if you haven't signed up yet, please do. Paul Weil, can you give us a report about the precinct delegates?
Yeah, sure, Tom. Well, yesterday, Friday, July 31st was the last day to register as a write-in candidate for being a precinct delegate in this primary that's taking place next Tuesday. According to the county clerk's website or official list, we have 3 new write-in candidates from Royal Oak, and there were also a couple other folks, one from Clawson and one from Royal Oak, who acknowledged being write-in candidates. I don't know if they got their letter of intent to the county clerk in time. Hopefully they did. So if they did, that would bring our total numbers in Royal Oak and Clawson up to 50 precinct delegates. Between the 2 cities, there's 129 allocations, so we're better than 1/3, maybe 40%. So also too, I was going to mention, but Sam just did, for all the precinct delegates, Royal Oak and Clawson, we're going to be meeting this Thursday at 7 o'clock. I did send out an email. If you didn't get it or you need more information, you can contact me, and I'll put my email in the chat. So that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. And I'll mention I have 100 Gary Peters lawn signs. So if you want a Gary Peters lawn sign, just come by my house and grab it. It's under the carport. My address is 3126 Glenview. Of course, that's in Royal Oak. So if you want a Gary Peters lawn sign, come by and grab it. We're going to hear from our elected officials, and then we're going to hear from any candidates who are on the call. But first, if you're an elected official, if you could please click that blue raise hand icon so that we know you're here, because I can't see everybody on the screen. But I can see Jim Ellison. So Jim, if you wouldn't mind going first and give us your elected officials report. Everybody, State Representative Jim Ellison.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everybody. We are officially on break, so there's not a whole lot of action happening in Lansing right now. We do go back Thursday for a quick meeting to get some legislation off the board. But we did, before we left, we did manage to get the budget proposals out. They're not bad, they're not good, they're a budget. And it's going to make us work, and it was a bipartisan budget. The governor signed it, so we've got that set, at least until next budget season, and then we'll deal with all the problems that COVID-19 brought us. But everything's still pretty quiet. We're still fighting the battle with our Republican colleagues wearing masks. It's very frustrating. An experience I had an 8:30 meeting that I had to drive to Lansing for. I had no session that day, so I drove up for this meeting at 8:30 in the morning, and not a Republican in the room was wearing a mask. So we complained to the committee chair, who chastised them, but it didn't make any difference. So we still continue to fight that battle, and as long as they want to not participate, then we're going to still see the kind of actions the governor did the other day with changing the stay in place and the requirements for reopening the state. But, that being said, we are going up again Thursday. Dem Caucus is going to take advantage of that. Since it is a Thursday after Election Day, we're bringing all of our successful primary winners up, and we're going to have a kind of a social orientation, get to know these candidates meeting on Thursday, and so that we can all hit the ground running on Friday. So Good things happening. We're looking very, very optimistic about what's going to happen here in November. A lot of very good candidates across the state, and I think we're going to see some surprises on Thursday. So, anyways, that's all I got. Unless anybody's got any questions.
If you have a question for Jim Ellison, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask it, because we've got elected officials with their raise hand icon. So does anybody have any questions for State Representative Jim Ellison?
Yes, yes, I do. This is Michelle Cook, and I'm a teacher, as I mentioned earlier. And I heard you mentioning about, Republican colleagues not wearing masks in session and how that's problematic. And I don't know that everyone is quite aware because of the way that media is covering everything with the schools reopening, but K-5 students are not required to wear masks. Neither are any of the students required to properly social distance. So as a preschool teacher, I'm quite concerned that, colleagues of mine who are in elementary school settings will be asked to return to work with only them wearing a mask, neither students wearing masks nor being socially distanced. And as I said, when you see all of the media coverage, there's a lot of, oh, look, your classroom's going to look different because your desks are going to be 6 feet apart, and oh, your kid's going to have to wear a mask, when in fact that's not the requirement. It's a strongly recommended item. So is there any talk about this in Lansing about the difference between recommended and required? Because it hasn't gone unnoticed in the teaching community that Governor Whitmer has made it now required for people when they go into grocery stores and the like to wear a mask, not just strongly recommended. And I think that was for a reason. And so we're really at a loss why we wouldn't use that same logic in schools. Thanks.
Quick answer is we wouldn't get Republicans to support it. As I just said earlier, they're not big on the whole mask wearing idea anyways. It's for any number of reasons that are not really valid. So in order for us to get some kind of mandate that says you must wear masks, we'd have to have a majority vote to make it into legislation, and it's not going to happen. The governor can issue her executive orders, and we've seen in the past how well those are followed. So, we could even on the floor, we have House rules for participation on the House floor that it's strongly recommended that you wear your mask. But it's never enforced. The speaker never enforces it, and so we've got a room full of Democrats. I will say probably a good 20% of Republicans that do wear their masks, but for the most part, they don't, and it's a big joke to them. So it's very frustrating. But I'm not aware of any push right now to change that we're going to require the kids to wear them or parents to wear them. It's a good question. It's a bad problem, and I'm not sure if we have a solution.
Eileen Orlansky, did you have a question for State Representative Jim Ellison? You're muted, Eileen. If
I just been reading some information about the governor vetoing a bill about placement of nursing home COVID. Yes. What's that? Can you just give us a brief
comment about it? I can try. It's kind of a complex, not really complex. The governor, in the process early on, we're all aware that she was having COVID-19 patients put back into nursing homes, and people thought that was terrible. But when you look at it in the broader picture, the people that are going with COVID-19 back in the nursing homes are the people that should be in the nursing home anyway. They're the Alzheimer's patients, the cancer patients, the patients that need to be there to deal with the health issues and life issues that they had before they got COVID. So, this big push to these seniors with COVID away from healthy seniors into a situation by themselves, like the TCM Center or the Novi Showcase. The patients would get treated for their COVID, but they wouldn't get treated for their other issues. And so that's why it made sense to put them in a facility, and they would only go in a facility that had been guaranteed to be isolated from the rest of the facility. You can do that with all kinds of measures, and that's what the order has always been. And the Republicans were using that as a campaign chip this year. Again, the governor's trying to kill our seniors, and so that was the legislation that they passed. It went right down party lines, and she vetoed it. So I expect that it's one of the things we're going to talk about when we go back on Thursday is they're going to want to override a veto. The other thing we did is there was a package of bills that were basically the DeVos education process that again passed out of the floor with party line votes, straight party line votes. So if it gets through the Senate, we'll see that on her desk. I'll be curious to see what she does with that. But again, it's a silly season up in Lansing. Everybody's campaigning for something, and so they want to get their hot button items out to the forefront. So in my mind, that's kind of what this is.
Chuck Altman, you have a question for State Representative Jim Ellison. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, Jim. As you know, the recommendations of the Michigan Joint Task Force on Jails and Pretrial Incarceration have been translated into legislation. My question is, what's the likely time frame for consideration, and how much support is there for the legislation?
I mean, that's one of the things that may actually travel pretty fast because it does have bipartisan support. We need to do something with these people that are incarcerated that shouldn't be there. And if they're in there based on the sentences that were made when laws were different, and so there is really it's been a good bipartisan problem. We've got a lot of Republicans working with us to get these things fixed. So I anticipate that may be, in a comparison of how fast things move in Lansing, that may be one of the faster moving things.
Thank you.
All righty. And thank you, State Representative Jim Ellison. Let's go to the Royal Oak City Commission now. City Commissioner Charlene Douglas, we'd appreciate hearing your elected officials report.
Thanks, Tom. So I guess the big news is marijuana. At our last commission meeting, the commission voted to allow, so think of marijuana in two categories. There's the industrial commercial uses, growing, processing, testing, and then there's the retail uses, which are traditional stores and micro businesses. The commission voted to allow one of each of the commercial uses, which are only allowed in industrial areas, and it voted to allow two of each of the retail uses, one of each of which may be located on Woodward. Now, they might all wind up in industrial zones, but only two, one micro business and one retail business, will be allowed to operate on Woodward. The commission put a lot of thought into this. We've been working on this for going on 2 years, and there was a rush of phone calls from people spreading disinformation, screaming about the fact that the Golden Basket was going to be turned into a 2-story mega marijuana shop right next to the pawn shop next door, completely ignoring the fact that the Planning Commission had already turned down the pawn shop. But really, data, I think, prevailed. We have the objective quantitative study that shows that 69% of Royal Oak residents voted for consumption in 2018. When we asked them where they wanted establishments to be located, more than 60% of them supported putting marijuana businesses in commercial areas, and Woodward is a commercial strip. It's zoned general business. And in fact, that's the only place where adult uses are allowed in Royal Oak. So, I mean, I'm confident we did the right thing. I want to thank all of you who phoned in to comment on this. Again, yes, we need to listen to people when they phone in, but we also have to think about data, and the data really said that marijuana businesses were the right thing for our city, that our people want them. Another thing, Arts Beats and Eats, as it usually operates, has been canceled and replaced with a series of drive-in concerts on the site of the usual main stage. So there'll be drive-in concerts. There will be an art fair over where the carnival rides usually are, and admission to all of these will be prepaid. No one will be paying at the door. All purchases will have to be made online. One of the advantages, I think, is that this will maybe, bring people to town and perhaps drive them more into our existing restaurants, and we certainly are trying to support them. Hats off to the DDA for their coupon program. I don't know if you all have signed up, but you sign up to get their newsletter and they send you a coupon worth $20 to spend in participating downtown stores. And that's in addition to the changes they've made allowing restaurants, all establishments really, to use their sidewalks and the parking meters in front of their establishments to set up business. Hats off to Luigi, who actually pitched a tent in the metered parking spaces there. City Hall, the move to the new City Hall starts August 11th. The 10th is the last day of doing business at the old City Hall. The new City Hall will reopen on August 21st, God willing, and the creek don't rise. The staff are finalizing their plans for how the city will operate. The important functions will continue to operate in that window. Obviously, police and fire will have full phone service, but phone service to city departments will be limited. But again, they'll be announcing very shortly how you can reach the essential city departments that you might need during that shutdown period. I think that's the highlights. I don't know if didn't see any other commissioners here, but if any of others want to chime in, go for it, or I'd be happy to answer questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Royal Oak City Commissioner Charlene Douglas? If you do, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it.
Yeah, hi, Char. This is Paul Weil. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on the climate resolution that the commission passed this past Monday.
Yeah, you know what, the Environmental Advisory Board met here a couple of weeks ago to pass a resolution that will, the essence, certainly in defense of practices to ameliorate climate change, but particularly to implement a greenhouse gas measurement system that the city is now committed to implementing or putting into place within, I think it's the next 90 days. Paul, I'm going to turn it back to you. You're more familiar with the details of that. Why don't you tell the folks?
Sure. So the details are the city is committed to doing a greenhouse gas inventory of the entire community by September 30th of this year. And then within 90 days after that of coming up with goals for greenhouse gas reduction. So hats off to both the Environmental Advisory Board and the City Commission for passing that.
Thank you, Paul. Does anybody else have any questions for City Commissioner Charlene Douglas? Thank you, Char. If we have any elected officials on the line, on the call, and you want to do a report, please click that blue raise hand icon, and we'll call on you. Let's go right to County Commissioner Penny Lubes.
Hi, thank you, Tom. Hi, everybody. In Oakland County, we're taking steps to keep our elections safe through our newly formed Election Advisory Council. So we're moving forward with providing prepaid return postage ballots for the November election. We're still moving forward with our grants. We have small retail, restaurant, personal service business grants now. The grants range from $2,500 to $10,000 to support payroll, rent, utilities, or other expenses in the normal course of businesses. We're also continuing with our veterans grants. And one more grant you should see upcoming in the next week is a grant to community centers, libraries, and senior citizen centers. So we're finalizing that. When that grant information is available, it will go out to our senior centers and community centers and libraries. So we're continuing to move forward with grants and helping and serving others. That's what I have.
Does anybody have any questions for Oakland County Commissioner Penny Lubes? If you do, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it. All righty. Well, thank you, Commissioner Lubes.
Thank you, everybody.
Oakland County Commissioner Dave Woodward, would have anything to add?
Sure. I'll add just a couple things. Probably the thing that's been consuming a lot of attention is that the Oakland County Safe, Healthy, and Secure Election Advisory Council that we did form. Actually, and the last thing that we did, but I think it's important to realize that Oakland County's been leaning in to maximize voter participation as much as possible. Altogether, what started off as we thought would be a few $100,000 effort has become more than a $4 million effort to maximize voter participation, safety, etc. If anyone is on the call that's never been an election worker, this is a real problem. As much as we want to get as many people to vote by mail as possible or drop their ballots off at a drop box, it's absolutely critical that we have beyond the minimum number of people working at all the polling locations. And given that the average age of an election worker is about 75 in Michigan, people are choosing for health reasons not to do that because that's obviously a very high risk group for COVID. And so we need to get additional people, probably some younger people that are less high risk. And the board also took efforts to add what we're calling appreciation pay, actually an extra $50 a day for those who work that. And so reach out to your local clerk's office, sign up if you're not doing it for this upcoming August primary. The same will be applied for November because there's a massive shortage. I just had 3 clerks reach out to me this morning. What can we do to launch a campaign to recruit people? And so we're going to be talking about how to be able to do that as well. The other thing around that kind of became around the election side, and particularly in the primary, and I want to thank the Royal Oak Dems for leaning in here to make certain that people who are voting by mail or the drop box or what have you, that we make certain that people do not spoil their ballots. On a normal election, 8% of all the ballots that come through vote by mail are spoiled in a primary. That's normal because someone crosses over, and if you don't correct it, the entire partisan section of your ballot is compromised. There are estimates that we might see upwards of 20 to 30% spoilage rate because there's such an influx of people voting to vote by mail, or at least at the request of the application. So the board leaned in. You probably saw in the local Royal Oak Review last week, a campaign just educating people, please stay on one side of the ballot, don't spoil your ballot. We want to make sure that all the votes count. And so we're going to be doing more of that and really picking up momentum with our focus really on the fall election to make certain that people have confidence in our vote by mail process. And then we're taking steps to figure out how do we deal with this post office issue. And we're possibly pursuing some litigation to make certain that postmark ballots count, but you'll hear more about that probably in the next coming month. I'll shift. Penny talked about the grants that are out there. If you know businesses, please encourage them to apply. Go to the Oakland County oakgov.com website, the COVID link, and then there's a whole menu of grants, and they'll do that. We're giving about $5 million of grants to local businesses every week, and we'll be doing that through August. And so if you know small businesses that they need to apply, encourage them to do that. And then the budget, which beyond the response to the pandemic, what are we going to be able to do to kind of chart the course for the next year? Oakland County is in a good situation. We do not have a massive budget hit like you will hear from other counties that rely on revenue that has been impacted because of COVID more directly than the property taxes. There are really 3 things that we are going to be zeroing in on. One, our continued expansion of public health and investment in healthcare. Oakland County, and under the leadership of our executive culture and our Democratic board, we've moved for the largest expansion of our public health departments in generations, and we're going to continue to do that and complete that project. It's a $4 million initiative that will expand healthcare, primary healthcare, mental health care, and family planning services to our health centers. An Oakland 80, this is an initiative to raise skills, make sure that 80% of our population has a post-high school education something, which that could be a trade, certificate, a degree, you name it, and aligning our workforce development to help achieve that, and we'll be investing in resources there. And three, we're going to be getting more involved in partnering with our local communities to advance policing policy as well as accountability issues in equipment, body cams, etc., and setting up a fund so that our local communities have the resources for body cams and the support for that to advance and improve justice and accountability. In addition to holding our police departments accountable by reporting data on race of people being pulled over, arrested, etc. Sadly, we've got some that are doing really great work in that area, and then we've got some that there's a lot of no data. And so we want to really encourage, hopefully leading with a carrot, that we're going to get that data to be able to make informed decisions about policy issues moving forward.
And we'll take questions for Dave Woodward in just a second. But first, if you're a candidate for office and you'd like to give the group a brief update on your campaign, please go ahead and click that blue raise hand icon in the participants window, and then we'll call on you one by one. But are there any questions for County Commissioner Dave Woodward? If you have a question for County Commissioner Dave Woodward, please just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it. Well, Dave, looks like you explained things extremely well, so you're off the hook.
Jeremy Marley's got a question in the chat. Jeremy, do you want to speak or do you want me to read it?
Okay, Dave, could you give your perspective?
The perspective on the primary election for county executive, my favorite subject. I'm supporting, Penny's supporting, Gary's supporting, Dave Coulter. Our board overwhelmingly stands with the current county executive. We've done a fantastic job. Democrats have worked so hard to get to this point. We are advancing progressive political change every single day. And I'm 100% behind, supportive behind Dave. And I say this as someone who was interested in being the county executive. And so we've got a great working team. His administration team is solid. And we've accomplished more in the last year than the Oakland County's accomplished in the last decade. So I'm super excited about what we've been able to do. And we're, like I said, we're just getting started.
All righty. Thank you, County Commissioner Dave Woodward. And we're now at the part of our meeting where we hit.
I had a question in the chat about the
Faye. Go ahead, Faye.
Oh, I see. Oh, sorry. I didn't see that. Okay. Faye, yeah, thanks. My impression that the long work hour is a barrier for election workers. Great question, Faye. I think it is. I mean, because it's a work hour that, I mean, well, election starts at 7, ends at 8, but these workers get there before 7 and stay there off sometimes long after 8. Some clerks, and I believe Royal Oak has participated, this advisory council that I appointed, I actually asked Melanie Halas, our Royal Oak clerk, to participate on it, and she's been great. There are clerks that use half-day increments. There's some barrier. If you're in a counting board, you can't come in and out of the counting board area if you're counting ballots, so the absentee ballot counting space. But there are some workers that do work a half-day shift, and for those workers that do work a half-day shift at the polls, the appreciation pay that we're putting on, and I would say the average, I didn't realize how far it ranged. I mean, from community to community, like 62 local jurisdictions here, but about $200. I mean, approaching $200 a day. We had the $50 appreciation pay, hazard pay, incentive pay that we made available. We're making half of that available if you work a half a day. So the short answer is yes. Because of the training that's required to make certain, I mean, you heard Dessa talking about knowing disability rights, and that's a host of other things. And the number of slots, just, I mean, from a county-wide perspective, there are 500 precincts. Average precinct has about 5 workers. So you're talking 2,500 people just to do the polls, not to mention the counting boards for every one of the counting jurisdictions. And so, I mean, you start quickly approaching 3,000 slots. So from a campaign perspective, 3,000 shifts. So if you had to divide that and everyone did half days, you need 6,000 people. And here's the reality. We've got 30% less people doing it this go around than we had in the past. I just read a story in Politico. And it's a nationwide phenomenon that's happening. And so I think clerks are making considerations for people who have a half-day availability. The other thing I think is important is that to take in consideration unemployment. And we're going to try to make certain that This is something I'm going to talk to our state representative, state senator, to make sure that people who work election workers, that pay shouldn't count against their unemployment. This is like a one-day thing. This is not a job. This is a little bit of compensation for a service that we need to support a democracy. So we got to fix that too, because there are people who are unemployed that says, well, I'll do it, but I don't want to do it and have it impact or stop my unemployment. So we got to get an executive order or something quickly, and then maybe even legislation before the fall.
So I heard that long day for counting was from a law, a Michigan law.
There is true, and I think my understanding for the counting board, the absentee voter counting boards, once you start, you can't leave if you have to be in there. Because you don't want people going, oh, the vote's going this way based on the tally, and they let people out. So they're basically sequestered during the entire day. I don't believe that applies to a poll worker who's working at a poll site and helping process people for voting. But I'll go back and check and verify. I don't claim to be the election expert. This advisory council that we formed, two of the best clerks, local clerks around the entire county are in our area, Oakland and Royal Oak and Ferndale, super innovative, doing drive-through voting and all sorts of things. But we also had a township clerk, our director of elections, ACLU, the League of Women Voters, the Disability Network for Oakland Macomb County, all like helping identify these policies and particularly the barriers to having safe, healthy, and secure elections this cycle. And I'll go to them because they'll have the answer about that, and I'll get back to you with it.
And thank you, County Commissioner David Woodward. Let's go right into our candidate updates then. And then we, especially shortly before election days and party conventions, we invite candidates to join us and give a brief update on their campaigns. And so we'll do that now. It probably means we're going to run over our meeting time. We usually try to end at 11:30. We'll run over a little bit today, but that usually happens in the weekend before an election. So first, let's hear from, and again, and to the candidates, if you are a candidate, please click that blue raise hand icon so we know you're here, and we'll give you a minute or two to give an update. The only request I have to the candidates is don't say anything negative about an opponent, just because your opponent might not be here and have a chance to reply. So first, let's go with Brian Moslem. Brian is a candidate for the MSU Board of Governors. Brian Moslem, go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Brian Mosalem. I'm a incumbent trustee at the university, as well as running alongside Dr. Rima Vassar. We are seeking nomination at the state convention, August 29th and 30th. We are both endorsed candidates of the AFL-CIO, the UAW, AFT, Femmes for Dems, Northville Democratic Club, Bay County, Ontonagon County, I think 5th Congressional, 13th Congressional. So we've been Zooming all across the state together. There are 2 slots to fill on the Democratic ticket come August 28th, August 29th and 30th. We would love your support. I'm not sure, I don't believe you guys endorse for the state convention, but we've been making our way around. I think if I could just be brief, probably my proudest endorsement comes from the survivors and their parents. If you would have told me 2.5 years ago that I would be embroiled in the largest sex abuse scandal in the history of this country, where I would be spending 80 to 100 hours a month at a volunteer position, only to be endorsed by survivors and their parents 2.5 years later, I would have thought we were in a movie. So it's been a wild 2.5 years. I can go on and on. I should have planned a reform. I held a town hall where one of 5,000 people showed up, and I was the only trustee. And in my plan of reform, now all sexual assault reports have to be read by the trustees. So we made a myriad of changes. I'm running alongside Dr. Rima Vassar, who's also on this call. We've done. We're moving in the right direction. We would love your support. I'll put my information in the chat. Again, this is going to be very unique. This is a virtual convention where we're going to have. We need 443 electronic signatures, I believe, between August 24th and August 26th. So I believe everybody's going to get emailed a petition, from what I'm hearing. And then I think it's going to be a party-wide, every party member as of the 29th can vote statewide. So we've been making our rounds. We're doing better things in East Lansing. We're improving in the DEI space, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're hiring a chief diversity officer. We're moving towards, we're holding DEI actual retreats. So we're making changes. We're moving in a positive direction. And like I said, I'm extremely humbled to be endorsed by survivors and the parents of survivors along with the rest. So I'll stop there. I'll see if anybody has any questions. If you don't, hopefully we can get your support at the state convention. Hopefully we can get you to sign that petition. And thank you, and go green.
Does anybody have any questions for Brian Mosselem?
Brian, hi, this is Lauren. Is the petition digital? Like, is it something that you could send to us right now?
That's a very good question. We're waiting to figure out exactly. So I believe the party's going to send that petition to every, from what we're told, electronically, electronic signature to every member. That, I guess they got their email list. So like I have addresses. So we're still waiting to kind of figure out the final details. August 19th, our deposit is due for intention to run, and then, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. Very interesting.
I see. Okay. So as of right now, we should just look out for your name and Dr. Rima's name.
Please, that would be great. Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you, Brian Mosselem, and
Thank
thanks
you.
for joining us today and
Thank
giving
you
us the
very
update.
much. Take care. Go green.
Thanks. Tim Chikorsky, candidate for the Royal Oak School Board. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning, everybody. The filing deadline for school board was like a week and a half ago. There are 6 people on the ballot. There are what we believe to be 5 like-minded, like we are, candidates. We're trying to work through that real quickly. Actually, I want to thank everybody on this call who's financially contributed to my campaign. It's been fantastic. I really greatly appreciate all of that. I've ordered signs. Those should be in early next week. I'm in the process of getting my walking lit. I've set myself a goal of hitting 16,000 doors by November. It seems crazy. I think we can do it with the help of maybe a lot of people from this club. We can definitely get that done. And yeah, that's all I have. If anyone has any questions for me, like real quickly, we don't want to take time from the other candidates today, but if there are questions, I can answer them.
Does anybody have any questions for Tim Chikorsky? Lisa Mason asks, who are your co-candidates? Are you running alongside anybody?
We've not come to that consensus yet. When we do have a slate, if we do have a slate formed, I will definitely make sure everybody knows who's on that slate.
All righty, and thank you, Royal Oak School Board candidate Tim Chikorsky. Clarence Dass, candidate for Circuit Court Judge, please go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. It's still good morning. It's great to be with you. I am Clarence Dass. I'm running to be your next Circuit Court Judge. I've talked to this group before. I know many of you, but I just wanted to say hi again. I have been very fortunate since probably we last met to have been endorsed by the UAW, AFL-CIO, Chief Justice McCormick, the incumbent, and 40 other judges in the county. I've been a prosecutor. I've been a defense attorney. I've been on both sides. I know what it takes to be a good judge, and I'm asking for your support, and I hope to see you after Tuesday. So have a great rest of the weekend.
And thank you, Clarence Dass, candidate for Circuit Court Judge. Mara Battersby Murphy, also a candidate for Circuit Court Judge. You can go ahead, please.
Now, am I allowed to say rude things about Clarence because he's here to defend himself?
No.
Do it later, Maura. Do it after the call.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see you again. I just want to thank you for listening to my spiel week after week. You guys have been wonderful and supportive, regardless of who you're ultimately supporting in the race. So I appreciate your time and consideration. If you have people who have not yet voted and who want to continue to vet the candidates, please feel free to have them call my cell phone, which is 248-885-2108. It is also the number that's listed on my website, which is MauraMurphyForJudge.com, and the Facebook page. I have found that people, sometimes they call and ask me questions and they say, nope, not voting for you. And sometimes they can ask more nuanced questions. And so that has been helpful. So I'd appreciate if you pass that information along. I want to thank you again for having me, and I hope to continue to do this after the primary. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mara Battersby Murphy. And if you want to put that phone number in the chat, please go ahead. And
I'll do that
people
right
can
now.
call
Thank
you.
you.
Randy Maloney, candidate for Oakland County Sheriff. Go ahead, please.
How you doing today? Thank you for inviting me. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say a shout out to Dessa. Great speech. Thank you. Very informative. Very much appreciated it. I have a handicapped grandson that has Down syndrome and a son that has mental health problems. So I know the disability world pretty well. And there's not enough light shined on that. There needs to be more done for the disability world. I'm running for Oakland County Sheriff. A little background. I retired after 25 years. I've worked every position in the jail, outside the jail, road contracts. The only reason why I retired early, because I couldn't handle the inappropriate activities, the corruption, and we need to get Sheriff Bouchard out of there, straight up, forward, get him out of there. He's been there too long. I want to rebuild with the communities. There's not enough done with law enforcement in the communities. Bridges need to be rebuilt with the communities, and since this virus, it's been really slow, but with the Zoom meetings I've had, the Democratic Party's been very, very good to me. I really appreciate everybody's help and everything. And that's about it for right now. That's to catch everybody up on.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Randy? All righty, thank you, Randy Maloney, candidate for Oakland County Sheriff. And then Dr. Rima, also a candidate for the MSU Board of Governors. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me again. I was with you June 6th, so I'm not going to take up a lot of your time. June 6th, I wanted to share with you a couple of the endorsements I've had since then. Debbie Stabenow, the senator, has endorsed me. Sarah Anthony, U.S. Representative, has endorsed me. Brenda Lawrence has endorsed me. And Muskegon County Dems, Livonia Democratic Club, Oakland County, Mackinac County, Allegan County. I've just been out here trying to make sure that I talk with everyone, and coming back to Greater Royal Oak is always a pleasure. You all are super involved and a inspiration to me in terms of your advocacy and how you also bring in an eclectic group of folks to talk. And the one that I'm really proud of is the Anishinaabe endorsement, and thinking about our Native population and somehow they get eclipsed in our conversations, and thinking about my own 3 thrusts, which are safety and belongingness, equity and accountability, and transparency and accountability. I think that the equity piece, as it relates to them and keeping, our outreach to them, but also keeping them in our school and retaining them and having them complete with affordable tuition, is one of the things I've been really thinking about here lately. So I just appreciate being able to come and talk with you all, and your advocacy and your democracy. Like, you just are super inviting and inclusive, and I just appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me. I am running alongside Brian. There are 2 seats available. There are 2 Republicans running at this point, and Brian and I are the 2 people who are on these Zooms, and so I'm hoping that we have your support going into the convention. This convention is unconventional, and we do need as much help as possible. So if you can engage, that'd be awesome. I'm gonna put my my information in the chat. Please do feel free to reach out if you would like. I love talking with people, so hit us up. I appreciate, again, your Saturday that is super productive.
All righty, thank you, Dr. Rima, candidate for the MSU Board of Governors. That looks like the end of our candidate list there. Arv's got to go. Arv, go ahead, please. You're muted, Arv. We can't hear you.
Okay, there we go. So I would like to make 2 motions regarding endorsements. The first one, I would like to move that we endorse Dr. Vassar and Brian Masalam for MSU trustee. I think our bylaws allow us to do it in this one meeting because it's happening at the convention. So that's the motion that I would like to go forward.
All righty, there's a motion on the floor that we endorse Dr. Rima and Brian Masalam for the MSU Board of Governors. And I'll note they're the only 2 Democrats running for the position, and those positions are going to be decided at the convention, the Democratic Party convention, later this month. So is there a second for the motion that Arv made?
Do you need a motion to suspend the rules to do that?
No, we don't, because it's just for the convention. It's not an election.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, is there any discussion of the motion that Arv made that we endorse these two fine candidates for the MSU Board of Governors? If you have any discussion you want to enter, just go ahead and unmute yourself and talk, or else click the blue raise hand icon and we'll accommodate you. Arv, go ahead, please. You had some discussion to add?
Oh, sorry about that. I didn't do
Nope.
that.
Mistaken click. Does anybody else have any discussion? Okay, all in favor of our club endorsing Brian Moslem and Dr. Rima for the MSU Board of Governors, please indicate it by clicking the green yes icon. You'll find that in your participants window. And if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the participants icon. Click that. That'll open up your participants window, and then you can actually, and if you're opposed, just go ahead and click no, and we'll just do it all at once. So if you're in favor of the resolution, click yes. And if you're opposed to the resolution, click no. And it looks like we're almost unanimous. We just had one no. So Brian Moslem and Dr. Rima, congratulations. Consider yourself endorsed by the Greater Royal Oak Democratic Club, and go ahead and publicize that any way you want.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is
Appreciate that.
awesome.
Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah,
Have a
you
great
guys
day.
are excellent candidates. You're going to do an excellent job. You'll continue to do an excellent job, Brian, and Dr. Rima, you'll do an excellent job. We're certain of it. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Go Green. Have a good day. Thank you so much for your time. Don't
Thanks,
forget to
Brian.
vote when those petitions come by. So we'll send you more information as time passes. But thanks again. Take
Yeah, just
care.
email it to me and we'll spread
You
it
got it.
around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to both of you. Okay, is there any new business? Oh, Arv, go ahead. Unmute yourself, though.
Arv.
You're muted, Arv.
Okay, this is Arp again. Okay, so I would like to make another motion, and this is that we endorse in the Royal Oak School Board race next month. So that's normally we have to do it this way, where we make the motion for the next meeting, and so that's why I would like to do that.
Yeah, there's a motion on the floor that we consider endorsing in the Royal Oak School Board race next month. And so is there a second for that motion? I think Ellen Napa, were you indicating you're a second by waving? Okay, so there's a second. All righty, so is there any discussion of this motion? And the motion is that next month we consider endorsing in the race for Royal Oak School Board. Any discussion on that? Yeah, pretty simple idea, and I think everybody understands what's at stake here. Okay, so if you're in favor of that motion, please indicate by clicking the green yes icon. And if you're opposed to that motion, please indicate by clicking the red no icon. And again, the motion is, should we consider endorsing in the Royal Oak School Board campaign next month? And it's clear the ayes have it. So next month we'll have that on the agenda. We'll consider endorsing in the Royal Oak School Board race. All righty, we're at the calendar new business portion of the
Can I make
meeting.
a motion also for an endorsement of the circuit court race next month after the primary?
Oh, okay. Tim is making a motion that we endorse in the circuit court judge race. Good idea, because yeah, we'll know, we'll have a pretty good idea who's running by next month. Does anybody second the motion that next month we consider an endorsement in the circuit court judge race? Okay, we have a second. Is there any discussion of this motion that we endorse next month in the circuit court judge race? If you have any discussion you want to add, just please go ahead and unmute yourself and add your discussion. Okay, the motion again, next month we consider endorsing in the Oakland County Circuit Court judge race. If you're in favor of that motion, please indicate by clicking the green yes icon. And if you're opposed to the motion, please indicate by clicking the red no icon. All righty, we got a pretty clear feeling in favor, so that motion passes. So next month we'll consider making an endorsement in the Oakland County Circuit Court judge race. And I'll mention that we will not have to endorse in any race, but next month we'll consider the endorsement, and then we can vote on any particular endorsement proposals.
Who made the second on that motion?
Mary Mills.
Okay, thank you.
All righty, is there any other, so we're new business calendar item. Does anybody have any new business or calendar items to share with the group any good and welfare type information. If you do, just go ahead and unmute yourself and kick it out there.
Okay, I have one item I wanted to share, which is just that our Facebook page went from having around 630 some likes to over like in the mid 700s. So it was really like we've gotten a lot of more followers in the past month. So just keep up the good work, everyone who's been sharing the club, and you know, it's working. I think it's pretty reasonable for us to get to 2,500, considering we're in a city of 50,000 people. So anyway, just wanted to share that.
Okay, thanks, Art. Does anybody else have any calendar items, new business, or good and welfare? All righty, now is when we normally do the 50-50 raffle. Boy, that sounds like a blast from the past now, doesn't it? I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Somebody say so moved.
Motion to adjourn.
I was just going to say, can I add one point just real fast?
Right.
Yes.
Very short. Just thank you to everyone who's submitted dues electronically. Lauren, if you could drop the link for that for anyone who would like to. Our dues are only $10, and we've been using them as discussed in the meeting today for things like bringing in interpreters today, paying for these Zoom meetings to allow us to hold the candidate forums, paying for Facebook ads to grow our reach and our impact in the community. So we are really using this money to help drive the forces that be in our community to elect Democrats and serve our mission. So if you haven't joined already or haven't paid dues already, please feel free to go ahead and click on that link and sign up. You'll start getting all of our emails if you don't already, and we'd love to have you. So thank you. Now go ahead and adjourn.
And then Faye first asked about the candidate forums. Are they recorded? Yes, they are. And if you go to the most recent club email, there's a link in there to our club YouTube page that Lauren created, and we've got all our recorded candidate forums and meetings in there. And since you spoke of money, I want to thank again, I put it in our email, thank again to all the elected officials that helped pay for our Democrats and Beer event. It was an excellent event. And one reason why we've increased our social media is because we did spend about $500 advertising about the Democrats and beer, and that did give a lot of supporters. So when when elected officials take money out of their own campaigns and kick it into the club, it just helps a lot. It's just a fantastic thing to have that kind of support. It's one of the reasons why our club's so successful, because we have such strong and consistent support from these excellent group of elected officials that we have locally. So thank you again to all of you. All righty, the motion on the floor to adjourn. All in favor, say aye by waving your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
And next month, we're going to have a guest speaker from the Teachers Union. It's going to be an excellent talk, and so we'll see everybody next month. Goodbye.